And that triggered an explosion of weird stuff. I mean, dreams. I was doing an ESP course at the time. The ESP course was amazing. Wild synchronistic events in the Jungian sense. The whole world was going mad, basically, as an attempt to persuade me, of the error of my previous ways, and a veil was opened, if you like, to what was really the universe was really like. All these helpful beings trying to help me from somewhere outside my consciousness. Everything I've just said, the whole world went completely mad, and a veil was torn over a period of 6 months. I suddenly saw how life really was.
Welcome to Mind the Shift. I am Anders Bolling. This episode is the result of yet another discovery of mine on Medium, the blogging platform. And yes, we will yet again delve into the big questions of who we are, where we come from, and where we're heading. The writings of Graham Pemberton caught my attention some time ago, maybe last spring or last winter, I can't remember exactly, because he published pieces like The Reality of Extrasensory Perception, The Resurrection of Jesus, Carl Jung and the Collective Unconscious, Quantum Physics and Spirituality. So those, headlines like that really catch my attention. And he has a website. No, he has two websites. One is dedicated to his first love, as he puts it, his music. And the other one is called Spirituality in Politics. Now, that sounds like an unorthodox combination. And hopefully we will get back to that and explain more about what that is, hear more about that. So welcome to the show, Graham.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot here on this podcast, as you may know or may not know. I don't know how much you've listened, but about bridging the gap between science and spirituality. So that's a big theme here. And is that also one of your main motivations, would you say?
Yes, I call it the reunification of science and religion, or spirituality if you prefer, but I tend to use the term religion because I don't see a big distinction between religion. There are orthodox religions, and there is religion in the true sense, which ultimately means the same thing as spirituality, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, well, I tend to think that there is a difference, but it's interesting to hear you say
there are orthodox religions who obviously have corrupted and done wrong things to spirituality and spiritual concepts. But the word religion actually means linking back, religio, link back, which is ultimately what spiritual people are trying to do. They're trying to link back to the source, I believe.
Yeah, well, if you see it that way, then it makes sense, actually, because I've always thought that religion it relates to, traditions and dogma and structural things.
That's what it's become. That's what humans have done to it.
Exactly. So to speak a little bit about the latest pieces that you've published on Medium, you published so many texts there. It's really fascinating. And I have definitely not read all of what you've written.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Yes, I'm not that amazing. So I've read a few of them, and they're really very interesting. Very, very. You can learn so much from them. One of the good things is also that you read a lot of books, and you tell others what those books are about. So
yes.
We who read your text don't.
Yeah. I've got a great pile of them here. Should I need to refer to them during the course of this discussion?
That's very good. So, and yeah, you've written lately, the last few months, I understand, a lot about quantum physics and spirituality, the link between quantum physics and spirituality or religion or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they dive pretty deeply. And you must have read, of course, dozens of books about that. You mention or you refer to names like Fred Alan Wolfe, Fritjof Capra, David Bohm, and all those people. And Dana Zohar seems to have a special place in your quantum heart. And why is that? Tell us a little bit.
Well, when I first started that series, I thought it might just be one article like the previous ones had been. Then when I went over my notes, I realized how it was that somebody starting from a position of physics, quantum physics, suddenly explored all the questions that are traditionally associated with spirituality. So the more I reread her book, even though I didn't necessarily agree with everything in it, it was a fascinating exploration of how somebody starting from the point of view of science can be led into these deeper questions about the afterlife, about consciousness, ultimately about cosmology and the nature of God. So it was like I suddenly got taken over, and every chapter I read felt like it needed a new article to discuss that.
So, what's the name of her book?
It's called The Quantum Self.
The Quantum Self.
The Quantum Self. I mean, I'm more deeply fascinated by the ideas of David Bohm, and I think he is the ultimate person who links spirituality with quantum physics. But as I discussed in a subsequent article, Dana Zohar suddenly caught my attention as somebody who was struggling with all the issues that science struggles with, and through quantum physics went deeper and deeper into all those traditional metaphysical and spiritual issues. That's why she ended up taking up so many articles, so to speak.
Dana Zohar. Very interesting. So, I mean, the issue of quantum physics and spirituality is really a fascinating and big one in these contexts. You hear a lot of people talking about it, but it hasn't always been like that, or rather, it's come in waves.
Yes.
So before we go further here, it would be interesting to hear you elaborate a little bit on what happened, what has transpired when it comes to how the connection between quantum physics and religion or spirituality has been depicted. I mean, since the 1970s or so. You mentioned a lot of books that came out then, and then there was a dip, and then there was another wave. So can you explain what has happened in this context?
You mean from 1975?
From like 19? Yeah, I think that was that when Fritjof Capra's book came out, or was it?
It was a bit. He was a bit later. I mean, in my series of articles, the first one I identify is Fred Alan Wolfe's book, Space, Time and Beyond.
Yeah.
So that was 1975, and he was completely overtly, stating spiritual ideas from his perspective as a physicist. Okay, that was then followed by Fritjof Capra, who specifically linked quantum ideas as he perceived them to Eastern religions. He has chapters on Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, and Taoism. So he was obviously endorsed by Heisenberg in his writing of that book. So Heisenberg obviously thought that he was onto something. And then there was an explosion. Apparently, I'm not familiar with all these books. There were, apparently, according to Capra and what's his name? Ken Wilber. Mm-hmm. According to both of those, there was then an explosion of books and articles on this theme in the next 7 or 8 years. And then at that point, Ken Wilber came in with his book Quantum Physics and denied that any of this was true. He was saying, this is all nonsense. Physicists aren't saying this, wake up, et cetera, et cetera. He was trying to, even though he was a perennial philosophist and deeply spiritual, he was saying, no, this isn't what they were saying. I've written an article critical of his thinking in that series. And then, again, it took off. We had Dana Zohar's book, Quantum Self, in the 90s, and also a fascinating book called Bridging Science and Spirit by Norman Friedman. And ironically, he compared the perennial philosophy with the ideas of David Bohm. And as his spokesman for the perennial philosophy, he chose Ken Wilber. So Ken Wilber, having denied that any of this was true, was then chosen as the spokesman whose ideas were the same as David Bohm. It goes round in circles, all this thing.
Ironic, yeah.
And as I was saying, the latest development is this year, Carlo Rovelli has published his book Helgoland, which is trying to take quantum physics back to almost materialism. He's trying to deny any spiritual aspects to do with religion, the soul, spirituality. He's taking it back, as it were, to nothing much more than matter. We have to re-understand how we interpret matter, but nevertheless, it's still matter, basically.
Yeah. So Rovelli is trying to roll back from the spiritual.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my interpretation. Yes, that's my interpretation.
Why is it called Helgoland? That's an island in the.
It's an island. It's the island where Heisenberg went meditated upon the initial problems of quantum physics. So he went there to this lonely island and sort of sorted out quantum physics in his mind, and that's why it's called Helgoland, because it's where Heisenberg made the initial discoveries in his mind that sorted out quantum physics.
But what does Rovelli say about, the fact that many of these actual physicists really refer to spiritual, mystical traditions in their writings?
Well, in a nutshell, he's saying they were wrong.
Okay.
in a nutshell, that's a summary of his book. That's a summary of his book. Yes. I go through all the points in my article about him. I go through all the points where he denies, when he tries to advocate materialism, he denies anything spiritual. And so on. So I list all the points that where he's trying to take quantum physics back to materialism or quasi-materialism.
Okay. So yeah, interesting how it's been going in waves up and down like this, and almost like there's fashion in it.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, and there's the ongoing battle between spirituality and materialism, which has been going on a lot longer than the quantum physics era.
Yeah, it started in the 17th century or something like that.
That was when there was a divergence, a noticeable divergence. Yes.
Yes. This is all very, very fascinating. But Graham, you haven't always been interested in all things spiritual, have you?
I haven't. No, I haven't. No.
You told me in our pre-interview conversation or communication here that you had a dramatic spiritual awakening, and now that's truly intriguing. Tell us more about that.
Well, it followed a period of, at school, my best subject was French. And therefore, not knowing what else to do, I went to university to study French because I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't think of anything else to do. And I went into a sort of a depression after that, which retrospectively I interpreted I'd made a bad life choice. Because I'd made the wrong life choice, I went into a period of depression. So I studied at university, I studied Sartre, Beckett, Camus, all those, the existentialists and stuff. And that seemed to tie in with my state of mind.
Yeah, well, the
things like that. So it reinforced my, what was going on inside my head. And things like that. And then I sort of hadn't thought very deeply about it, but I imagine on the basis of those writings, I would call myself an atheist at that point. And then I obviously became a bit disenchanted with that or lost interest, and sort of had a spell in left-wing politics, which was also, from my perception, a mistake, which only increased my depression. So it came to the point in about, whatever it was, I started, feeling severely depressed. And
how old were you then?
I was about coming on for 30, about late 20s, 29, something like that. And then having got to that point of having suicidal thoughts, and not that I was planning suicide, but it's just like, what is the point? What is the point? Yeah. I then made the decision, influenced by somebody else who was like a sort of a mentor to me at that point, to look inside rather than outside. Right. So left-wing politics is about blaming other people. It's about blaming the bourgeois, blaming the rich. It's blaming everybody for your problems apart from yourself. And at that point, something led me to look inside myself to solve my problems rather than outside. And that it's like I started a personal psychoanalysis. Mm-hmm. That decision was what triggered the spiritual awakening. I started writing an autobiography, analyzing my life, all my tendencies, my personality. And that triggered an explosion of weird stuff. Dreams. I was doing an ESP course at the time. The ESP course was amazing. Wild synchronistic events in the Jungian sense. The whole world was going mad, basically, as an attempt to persuade me, of the error of my previous ways, and a veil was opened, if you like, to what was really the universe was really like. All these helpful beings trying to help me from somewhere outside my consciousness. Everything I've just said, the whole world went completely mad, and a veil was torn over a period of 6 months. I suddenly saw how life really was.
So you describe it as if the veil was being taken away from you.
Yeah.
So how did you perceive the world after the veil was lifted?
Well, in the way that most spiritual traditions do, in the viewpoint of these spiritual quantum physicists, things are interconnected. Where our consciousness is not just something to do with our brain. We can make contact telepathically with other people. I mean, the whole vision of how consciousness in the universe work just changed. And if you believe in the transcendental aspect of synchronistic events, what on earth is organizing Jungian synchronistic events from some other level of reality? Those sorts of questions open my mind. I forgot to mention.
Did you actually see that? Did you see auras?
No, no. It was obviously how I interpreted the world, having experienced those events. There's a very interesting dream that I had at the end of that period. In this dream, I was in a cinema watching a Monty Python film. So my dream had informed me what you've been watching is a Monty Python film we've created for you. And now there's going to be there was an intermission in the film, It's now going to stop. The veil has been torn. You've seen what it's really like. Now we're going to go back to normal, sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, that's very clear, isn't it? If you interpret it that way. Yeah, I interviewed an Italian musician called Marco Misinato, who is also awakened, you might call it, and he said some very fascinating things about how life, the veil and taking away the veil and all that. And he said he also had this analogy with us looking at a movie in a theater, actually. And it's going to be like that when more and more people are going to awaken. They will interpret it as if the lights go on in the theater, and suddenly you see what's around the theater, and you don't see the screen is going to be ever paler, and you're going to see what's outside of the screen, more or less. And it's going to be like, whoa, this was an amazing movie, an amazing show, but now it's over, and thank you for us having experienced it, but now we have to go on.
Absolutely.
A bit like that.
Yeah. Well, if the world carried on being like that, it's hard for me to function the way that I do now. I mean, I would be I wouldn't have time to practice my guitar, and I wouldn't be able to write because I wouldn't be able to concentrate, because if all these mad things were still going on, how would I be able to do what I'm now doing?
Yeah. So how did it dissuade a little bit after these 6 months that you?
Okay. I mean, since then I've had occasional synchronistic events, and I still obviously have dreams, sometimes big dreams and things like that. But this period of the world going mad is over. I forgot to mention one thing in that period of transformation. Right at the end of it, I did an extraordinary consultation with the I Ching. You understand? You know the I Ching?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with it, but I know.
Yeah. It's this
I Ching, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that was one last thing that blew my mind. And I had this sort of burning question. And this mentor of mine had that copy of the I Ching, and he invited me to go over for my first, initiatory meeting with the I Ching. So I did it. I threw the coins. Then he opened the text for me at the right place, and it just blew my mind. It answers my question. So that was that was the last thing I missed out in that previous description. Yeah, my first initiation into the I Ching, which never fails to work. It never fails to work.
Oh. But do you feel that way continuously now in your life, that if you just open yourself to the universe and what the universe wants to show you, and let's so to speak the life unfold as it is supposed to unfold for you, that things happen the way they should in the right order and all that? Is it the way
I have no direct perception into that. I believe intellectually that's true. But I don't have any direct insight. I don't meditate or try to attain higher states of consciousness, which might enable me to access that sort of state. I just believe it intuitively, from my own experiences.
And that gives a kind of a calm, I guess. Also.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm very, as you can tell, I'm very interested in writing and the intellectual side and investigating these ideas. I believe that's part of my journey.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, you're also a musician. You're a guitar player, singer-songwriter. So tell us about that.
Well, that was always the choice I should have gone down when I originally chose French to go to university. I mean, I should have gone for music.
Yeah.
I didn't believe I had the ability or the talent or anything. I had doubts or whatever. I had no reason to think that it could be successful in that way. But as a result of the spiritual awakening, I mean, through dreams and other things, I was led in the direction that my original choice should always have been music. So since then, I've written not a massive number of songs, but quite a few songs on the sort of themes that we're talking about. Obviously, I can't go as deeply into a song of 3, 4, 5 minutes, as some of the topics we're discussing today. That's why I write as well. Yeah. Pete Townsend from The Who, he once said, "There's a limit to what you can say in a 3-minute pop song." Which is it's clearly true. There is a limit to what you can say in a 3-minute pop song, but you can say a certain amount. You just try and capture something, in a 3 or 4 minute song.
So
but that's what I've been trying to do.
Things in a poetic way, you can probably say more things in that way than in an ordinary text, I guess.
That's my hope. That's my hope. Yes, yeah.
So, what kind of music is it? Is it like singer-songwriter music?
It's singer-songwriter stuff. I mean, on my YouTube channel, it's just that singing and guitar. It's an acoustic guitar arrangement of my main songs. So on my YouTube channel, it's just that. I've just splashed out on the latest Mac with Logic and GarageBand in order to do a fuller arrangement of my songs. That's the plan anyway. Yes, with backing. So a full arrangement of my songs. I've just bought the latest Mac to help me do that, but I haven't really got down to it yet.
Okay. So do you perform also, or?
Well, during lockdown, it's been pretty difficult. Before lockdown, I was doing open mics, which is you go to a pub or a bar and then you get 2 songs or whatever, something like that. So I was doing quite a lot of that before lockdown. Haven't quite got back into it again yet. The open mics are just beginning to reopen after lockdown. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, once I've got a bit more confidence with that, then I could try and get gigs or, festival performances or something like that,
Okay, so how did you begin writing things and publishing things on Medium like you do now, and also writing all these articles on your website?
I've been doing, I suppose you could say I've been doing research and reading for 20 years, perhaps, a long time. And then I hadn't done anything with it. And then a friend of mine just informed me of Medium, told me about the existence of Medium, and it seemed like a good idea. I went on it and saw what people were doing and thought, oh, this is the place, so I just signed up and started. And at the same time, I developed my website then. I started my website at that point, so that I could publish jointly in both places, in both forums.
And you have written a book or 2, haven't you, also?
The book I've written, I call it a book. I mean, it's finished. It's unpublished. I mean, it's one of these things that I've never done anything with. It's just been sort of sitting there, wondering what to do with it. It's on a slightly weird subject for some people, astrology. So,
okay.
To
me, it's not weird.
It's not good. That's great. As you mentioned, Mercury retrograde.
I know.
That's great. It's great to hear it's not weird. Okay, so basically, following my spiritual awakening period of 6 months, my mentor, who was into all this sort of stuff, invited me to go to an astrology lecture at the local library. Yeah. And so I went along because everything else that he told me so far up to that point had been great. and then the one thing that stood out from what the speaker said was, he said that after 28 years, the planet Saturn returns to the place of your birth.
Classic Saturn return.
Saturn return. And he said, Saturn is the planet of unfinished business when you're forced to confront all your unresolved issues, which is exactly what had happened to me when I was 28, So I thought, wow, that's extraordinary, which led me to believe, well, there might be something in this astrology after all, So I then, from an outsider's perspective, I don't study astrology. I don't do it technically speaking. But I mean, I started reading a lot of the literature around it, of what astrologers were saying. So I wrote this book trying to get to the bottom of how astrology might be true, how it might be true. So from an outsider's perspective, can we find anything meaningful and true in astrology?
Yeah, I read this article about it. I think it probably an extract from your book or something.
That's right. Yeah.
Which I found very intriguing and interesting, and because it is actually, I mean, I think it's a good endeavor to try and and explain these things in a way that modern people can understand it, because it very easily becomes very woo-woo if you don't do that. So I think it was very, I can't remember exactly the contents of that article, but I remember that I thought that, wow, this is interesting.
Well, in part one of the book, I tried to develop a worldview which would make astrology possible. That's it. So I create a worldview which would make it possible. And that worldview is very much based upon quantum physics, the sort of things that David Bohm, etc., all those others were saying, and Jungian psychology, the world of the archetypes and his archetypal cosmos. So it's a synthesis of Jungian psychology and quantum physics was the worldview which would allow astrology to be possible.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's good. I had this. I had Pam Gregory on the show.
Oh yeah,
you know about her, I guess.
This book. I've noticed her. Yeah,
her book is called "You Don't Believe in Astrology, Do You?" It's an excellent title.
Yeah,
and she explains very well, also very eloquently, what it is about. And I asked her. She's a wonderful woman, and she said some very, very interesting things on the show. You might want to listen to that interview.
Yeah.
I think it's episode 41 or something. And then we talked about the basics of what astrology is. And I personally think that it's maybe a bad idea to keep, not a bad idea, but to make people understand that it's not about some kind of radiation emanating from the stars or the planets entering our bodies, but rather it's like every point in space-time has its own quality, so to speak. So there is a quality in time, and every point in space-time is unique. And that's more what it's all about, in my view. That I mean, you can divide heaven or the universe in 360 degrees. It goes all around the earth like this, and then you can divide it into 12 sectors, as astrology does. And the 12 sectors have they are associated with different packages of traits and properties. But it's not that, I mean, the star constellation of Libra or the star constellation of Virgo exactly is the entity that is affecting us, but it's rather the sector itself, the part of the sky that is there. And there also happens to be this star constellation, and that's why we call it Leo, Libra, Virgo, whatever. So that's, I mean, if you can explain it in this way, I think it's easier for people to understand that it might be something about the quality of space-time and the points in space-time, and, as you say, also quantum physics and the existence of a unified field that is out there and can affect us, or will obviously affect us.
So the unified field is the interconnected universe. So the idea, quantum physics, that everything is interconnected. So all particles are interconnected, even in non-locality at great distances. There's no reason why, actually, physically, any part of the universe couldn't affect us. That's possible. But along with you, I mean, the idea I go for is more goes back to the ancient ideas of, it's not the planets themselves. This is a heavy idea, you could argue. It's like going back to what you would call the gods and the goddesses, or the archetypes behind the planets. So I know if we start calling them gods and goddesses, it's a bit funny. But I think Plato believed that all planets and stars had a soul level to them. Like there's in the same way that we believe that we have souls, like there's a soul level to the planets. And that's where, according to the ideas that I was getting from Jung and the archetypes, that's the level of the planets where this stuff is coming from, rather than the actual physical manifestation of the planets. That was an idea I was playing with and discussing in the book.
Yeah, that's really good. Archetypes is a very good concept in this context, I think.
And that's what some of the astrologers I was reading were saying. They were talking about Plato, archetypes, that sort of level.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of them. Can I just introduce you and your listeners to two books?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is one who puts everything that I said in my book much better. Okay. So this is a book called The Archetypal Cosmos by Kieron LeGrice.
Okay.
Now, he sets out with the same aim as me to create a worldview which would make astrology possible. So there's lots of cosmology, Jung, archetypal stuff in there. So basically it's called the archetypal cosmos. Now, he's following on from this other astrologer type philosopher called Richard Tarnas, called Cosmos and Psyche.
You can put it a little bit higher, please?
A bit higher, yeah.
Cosmos and Psyche, okay.
Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, he is actually talking about the actual astrology, and he's proving what astrologers say. Allegedly, he analyzes what the planets say, and he goes through the history of the planet and human consciousness and identifies what astrologers say with that. So Kieran LeGrasse, following on from Richard Tarnas, has written this book explaining or creating a worldview which would make astrology possible. And they've done a much better job than I did. But, I think my book's still interesting, but they did a better job than I did.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Thank you for the tips. And, you should try to publish your book, I guess.
Maybe. Well, I'm happy for people to read it on Medium at the moment. I'm about halfway through publishing it on Medium.
Okay, good. So I'm going to be a little bit lazy here and just go by some of the bullet points that you said beforehand that you wanted to talk about in our conversation. Okay. I'm sure that some of it we have already covered here. Yeah. So the first bullet point you mentioned is the reunification of science and religion. We've talked about that, and you have this view that religion is a word that you can use in this context just as well as spirituality.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. Not everybody is, but I'm comfortable with it, yes.
So where do you think we're going with that? What's happening when it comes to the reunification of science and religion? This wave thing about, this up and down going thing about quantum physics and connecting it to spirituality, is that going to continue or deepen, or what do you see? What tendencies do you see?
Well, I haven't been following, apart from reading Carlo Rovelli's book, I haven't been following the latest developments in quantum physics. I see it as sort of going a bit beyond that. I see quantum physics as the key to the reunification, but at the same time, it's not being sufficiently appreciated, it's not being taken into account enough. You could argue that 100 years ago, quantum physics destroyed materialism and the antiquated, Enlightenment worldview and the Newtonian physics and stuff like that. You could argue that. And yet 100 years later, has anything much changed? We believe, I think, that we're in the process of a paradigm shift, what's loosely called the new paradigm, along the lines of Thomas Kuhn's book. There's the old paradigm, which is still hanging around, and that coexists with the new paradigm, and they live together simultaneously for a while, and at some point something will happen to trigger the putting the old paradigm into the dustbin of history, putting it into a cemetery somewhere. But it doesn't seem to have happened yet. So all we can do is keep working. We notice that there are all sorts of scientists who think like we do. And at the same time, there are all sorts of scientists who think the opposite of what we do. And so there is this ongoing tension between the old paradigm and the new paradigm. So we just have to keep working at it, and at some point, if history teaches anything, the new paradigm will eventually take over, and what we perceive as materialism, anti-spirituality will disappear, or at least go back into the background for a period. Up until the Enlightenment, the sort of things we believe in were always considered to be true. Yeah. I believe. Yeah. It's only in the last 300 or 400 years that there's been this divergence. Now, you could argue, and I'm willing to concede, that we needed that divergence in order to get the technology and all the stuff that we've now benefited from. So all the developments in electricity, technology, medicine, all that stuff. Perhaps we had to have the Enlightenment to give us that. But there comes a point when that's served its purpose and we have to move on to something else deeper. So one of the ideas that I'm very interested in is that the evolution of consciousness is not like a straight line, as sort of the Enlightenment people might think, nor is it circular, where you return to the beginning, but it's a spiral. Mm-hmm. You go around in circles, and at some point you come to a point where you're exactly above something before, but you've incorporated what's happened in between.
Yeah, that's a very, very good image, yeah.
Yeah. So if you think of the Renaissance, the end of the Renaissance in Florence and Italy, with Marsilio Ficino, Pico de Miran, all those sort of people who were reviving Hermeticism and all the ancient ideas, Plato, Neoplatonism, Right? So that was a point. And there was our divergence. The circle went round and we went through the Enlightenment. And now we're coming back to the point where we need to reconnect what we've learned from the Enlightenment with the ancient worldview. That's my perspective. And we're at that point now because it's happening. It's happening. But, what's going to trigger it to make it a reality? We need just to keep talking to people, persuading them, if it's possible to persuade these materialists and these people. Or alternatively, as some people say, you have to wait for them to die. So somebody said that progress in science is judged by funerals. You wait for the scientist to die, and then we have to hope that we don't have to go through that because it's too pressing, it's too urgent. If the scientists and the climate change scientists are correct, then we haven't got that long to sort this out. We need to sort this out now, and move on to the new paradigm before there is no planet left or no human.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure that that's going to happen.
Neither am I. Neither am I. It's just what
they're interested in that subject, actually. So I study a lot of that.
Yeah, it's what they're saying.
I know. There's something going on, but I'm not sure how.
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist too. Yes.
Excellent. I'm too. Yeah. So I tend to think exactly the same way you do here with the spiral analogy. That's really good. So we're actually back to where we were in the 16th century, but on a very much higher level. So we're looking, as you say.
So the reunification to come will be taking human evolution of consciousness even further to another round of the spiral.
Yeah. So we have to incorporate these, what we call science, with what we also call spirituality, and realize that it's actually the same thing. And nowadays, maybe people can incorporate these things more easily because they can be, as I have written somewhere there, understood as science. This can be understood as science, this spiritual thing. And maybe people won't, in 100 years, we won't probably even speak of spirituality and science like that. We might have a third word for
that would be great. Things. Yeah,
that would be great.
Yeah, it used to be called natural philosophy. That's what science was called before the Enlightenment.
Why not?
Then science perhaps will develop a new term beyond natural philosophy and beyond science. Perhaps, as you say.
Yeah, yes. Or life science is a very good term, actually. But it refers to something specific, but it might be called just that.
Yeah.
So, I had a question there, but I forgot it.
Okay, well, in that case, let me just, some people are, here's another book for you. Do you know Gail Kimball?
Gail Kimball? No, unfortunately, I haven't heard about that.
She has published a trilogy of books called Dialogues with Visionary Scientists. So these are scientists who sort of, on the whole, believe similar things to what we do and stuff like that. Yeah. So this one called the Mysteries of Reality.
Yeah.
And there are two earlier books in the series called The Mysteries of Healing, Dialogues with Doctors and Scientists, and The Mysteries of Knowledge Beyond Our Senses, Dialogues with Courageous Scientists. Yeah. So The Mysteries of Knowledge Beyond Our Senses, Dialogues with Courageous. So that's a trilogy of books where she interviews all these scientists who are what we would loosely call new paradigm scientists.
Yeah, fascinating. It looks pretty thick there. So if you read the book,
it's not too bad.
You write, you read it. You write a review on Medium, and I'd read that. So.
Okay. Well, you don't have to read the whole thing. Because it's loads of interviews with different. I haven't read them all. I picked out the 2 or 3 or the 4 that that were most appealing to me and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, excellent. Your second bullet point was. Also something that we are talking about right now, which is natural because it's a continuous flow here, but it's new paradigm thinking. So speaking of paradigms, do you think that there is, you mentioned that we might be in a point of time in history where there is a shift going on and a new way of looking at things, but do you think that there is a critical mass of spiritually awakened people, so to speak, that is needed for change to happen?
Well, I can't possibly know whether there are enough at the moment. If you read on Medium, there are plenty of people writing on Medium. I'm not sure there are enough in the general populace. That's the thing. I don't want to be disparaging. Amongst the middle class educated people, there are reasonably large numbers of people who believe things that we do, believe things along the lines of the new paradigm, but there are also plenty who don't. The general don't wish to be rude or offensive. The general populace in Britain, at least, seems far more interested in cookery competitions on TV, dancing competitions, whether their team's going to score in the next 10 minutes in the Premier League, comedy shows. It's what most people seem preoccupied with, those sorts of things. I don't know what we have to do to create the number of people you say. I mean, I just don't know the answer, how many we have, how close we are. It's just something we have to keep working at. That's all I can say.
Yeah. What about surveys where people are asked what they believe in and things like that?
Okay.
Have you seen that kind of?
I haven't. No. Do you have any information?
I haven't recently, but I haven't seen any recently. But I think I have the impression that the number of, or the proportion of people who are atheists, for instance, is not increasing. It's rather decreasing, I think. But I mean, I'm just guessing here.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
I have that impression.
Yeah. The problem is, of course, in America, you do those sort of surveys, you discover that most people are biblical fundamentalists and things like that. So that's not actually helpful. They may not be atheists.
Down actually in the
United States. Indeed.
Among young people in the United States, they're not going to church.
Yeah. But if they're counted amongst the people who aren't atheists, then it's not all that helpful.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, well, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what kind of mindset that you need here in order to understand this shift. Okay, so I can just tell you, speaking about how difficult it can be sometimes to reach out to those kinds of people that are not used to thinking these ways, in the ways that we are doing right here now. I wrote this piece on Medium that you have read also, 2 parts. Next Leap Will Change Everything, I think is the title.
Yeah, indeed.
Changes everything. And
we pray. We live in hope and pray.
I sent it to a couple of magazines here in Sweden, actually, but not in the English version, but the Swedish version, which I wrote first. And one of the magazines, which is a fairly much an out-of-the-box thinking magazine, I would say, at least as far as I know this magazine. And I sent it to them, and they were interested, and they conveyed it further to the editor, the cultural editor, in charge of these kinds of matters. And so he came back a few days later, and he asked me whether I had smoked mushrooms, and and also what is, without being ironic, I think you haven't taken into account what China might think about this. The Communist Party of China, and China is the coming power now. What are they going to say about these things? How is it going to be possible, this change, without taking into account what China has to say about it? And I just realized, whoa! I mean, we're on different planets here.
Yeah, you certainly are. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, we just have to work where we are, don't we? You work in Sweden, we'll work in the West. We'll let China sort themselves out.
Yes, exactly.
Let's not worry about China. Let's focus on where we are. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Chinese or Africans or Europeans. I'm talking about goddamn, soul and spirit. Anyway, so we might have a long way to go still.
Yeah, who knows?
By the way, do you know about the Galileo Commission? I always take the opportunity to do some marketing.
No, inform me.
It's a group of people. It's actually an offspring from the Scientific and Medical Network. It's a network of scientists and philosophers and others who are adamant that we must understand exactly what we're talking about here, namely that spirituality and science have to merge. So they are working to spread this knowledge, new knowledge, also new science that is coming out about near-death experiences and things like that, and out-of-body experiences and telepathy and all those kinds of things, and even previous lives research, very serious research at the University of Virginia. So the Galileo Commission, and I interviewed also on the podcast David Lorimer, who is heading that.
I know him. Yes.
Outfit. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yes, he's the man who runs the Mystics and Scientists conference, isn't he?
Yeah, might be. Yes.
Yeah, I've got a book here somewhere. One of my books that I've got here somewhere is it's the Mystics and there is definitely here it is. Is it David? Yes, here we go. There is an organisation in Britain called the Mystics and Scientists Conference, and they meet once a year to discuss and eat it. And this is a book which is various lectures up to the 1990s. You may not be able to see that, but the man at the top, it says edited by David Lorimer.
Oh, yes, I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, David Lorimer, yeah. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the scientists and mystics who came to the conference. It's a transcript of their lectures and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's obviously an important figure.
He is. Okay, so the third bullet point here is ancient wisdom.
Okay, yeah.
So have you yourself delved into the mysteries of the origins of humankind?
That's going a long way back.
That's a rabbit hole.
That's going a long way back. I'd say I've studied. I mean, I've made myself familiar up to a point with the teachings of Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, Kabbalah, ancient Egyptian. Ancient Egyptian, let's say, if the Orthodox story is true, doesn't go back beyond 3000 BC. So let's say I've studied at least from 3000 BC. 3000 BC up to the present, up to when the ancient wisdom stopped. Let's say, well, it's never really stopped. It's been carrying on underground. But I mean, when the ancient wisdom was prevalent, let's say up to the time of Jesus, there was Kabbalism, there was Gnosticism, there were all those other ancient religions that came before up to that point. So if we call that ancient wisdom, then you have to worry about, was humanity going on before that time? I mean, was Sumer really the beginning, or was there ever Atlantis? Those are sort of questions, So I mean, if Atlantis ever existed, I have no idea what they believed or taught. So I can only stick with the texts and the writings that we have and the interpretations of them.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fascinating to think the thought that there have been high civilizations before, maybe several times, and that they have been destroyed for some reason, for one reason or the other. I mean, there is this compelling evidence that there was a cataclysm around, 10,000 BC, I think, around that time. The Younger Dryas. Yeah, there's lots of scholars, and I mean, maverick researchers, of course, but also scholars who are diving into this and looking into this, and there is some evidence that I mean, something definitely happened, and so why not think the thought that there was a civilization that was wiped out, whether it was Atlantis or something different, but
we're not. Well, I'm talking about
also very mystical how the pyramids came about and the Sphinx and all that, and we know about all that discussion, I guess.
The water erosion, Robert Schoch.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do. Yes, I know about that. Yeah. So when I say ancient wisdom, I only really mean the texts going back as far as the Vedas and Taoism and those sorts of things. I don't mean going earlier than that. It may have been derived from earlier traditions, but I don't know anything about it beyond.
Well, it's ancient enough from our perspective, but on some level, it's just yesterday. Also,
yes, indeed, yes, So when people like Niels Bohr talk about quantum physics connects with the ancient wisdom, and when Stanislav Grof, do you know Stanislav Grof?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, he's written this book in my pile here. I won't get it out. It's called Ancient Wisdom and Modern Science.
Yeah.
So Stanislav Grof is another one of my heroes. Yeah. He is a giant in our field, starting off as not as a Marxist, starting off as a psychiatrist in Marxist Czechoslovakia, where while he was only allowed to do certain things, he suddenly got involved in this LSD program for therapeutic uses, and discovered, the whole world, all the other worlds that you might access, if our minds weren't so limited by our brains and stuff like that. So LSD opened himself up. He had a confrontation with the god Shiva.
Oh,
in an LSD experience, cosmic experience with Shiva, stuff like that, and his clients and his patients were doing all sorts of extraordinary things. So basically, over his life, he's been started off as a sort of Freudian psychiatrist, psychoanalysis. He's been transferred into this being who believes in everything we believe in. He was a friend of Joseph Campbell in America. He's got the whole package, the mythology, the astrology, the cosmology, the consciousness. He's got everything, basically. He's brilliant.
You mentioned Joseph Campbell as well. So there are so many brilliant thinkers and feelers and pointers out there. And you also had this final bullet point, which is Jungian psychology. And you've mentioned Carl Jung several times already.
Yes, indeed.
He was really ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Yes. I would say so. People haven't caught up with him yet. A lot of people have, but not so other people haven't. He's not widely accepted in traditional psychotherapy, psychiatry and stuff like that. He's sort of ridiculed up to a point. He's mystical. That's the problem.
Is he still ridiculed, would you say?
Shane, there was an article in one of my current series of articles on Medium. There was somebody who wrote an article. I won't mention his name in case he doesn't want me to. A male philosopher type wrote an article about Jung and the collective unconscious. Mm-hmm. And he the first half of his article was basically saying how Jung is ridiculed, how he's not taken seriously in academia and stuff like that. I then got a reply from somebody else saying, well, that's not true where I live. He lived in the European Union and he thought that Jung was fairly standard fare on most psychology courses. I think this other guy was possibly writing from America, so where there is much more, control of what you're allowed to believe in American academic circles. And he's widely, strangely, I wrote an article in response to that man's article, and it's become my most popular article on Medium ever. The most number of claps, the most number of responses, most number of everything, so it's gone off the scales. There's a lot of people out there who are with me saying, yes, Jung doesn't need to be accommodated within science. You stick with Jung as he is and stuff like that. So, to get back to your original question, it's like Jung's ideas were the central part of my spiritual awakening. Okay. Everything that I did was deeply steeped in Jung. So you had dream interpretation, analyzing your own psyche, ESP I was doing, synchronicity was going mad, the I Ching. These are all things that are right out of Jung's textbook.
And astrology. He was into astrology as well.
Well, he was, yeah. That wasn't part of my. Well, that wasn't part of my 6 months.
Came later, perhaps.
Came slightly later, yeah. But my first 6 months were all those things, and so it was like I was being given a lesson in the textbook of Jungian psychology. That's what my 6 months was. Basically, it was just Jungian psychology. So that's what I'm saying.
Very interesting. And it seems as if Jung is at the core of many Westerners' awakening processes, or spiritual awakenings that are happening in our necks of the woods, so to speak. It was like that for me as well. I shouldn't say that I had a dramatic spiritual awakening at some specific point, but I've had snippets of awakening all through my life, more or less. And I had one period when I met my wife, who is now my ex-wife, but still my best friend, because we had a very happy divorce, and we are well, that's a different story. But
that's the best kind. That's the best kind.
It was an act of love. Anyway,
yes.
So when I met her, we had a period where we read a lot of Jung. And we had almost mystical experiences together. So before we had a family and all that. So that was, it seems as if Jung is really close to maybe it's easier because he is also semi recognized in science, in Western science, to some extent, at least in Europe. So it might be easier for people to get into these things by way of Carl Jung.
He's interesting in the sense that even though Hinduism and Buddhism and the Eastern religions are deeply fascinating, he was critical of them because they didn't place enough importance upon what we do in this world at the material level. It was like he perceived them as trying to get rid of ego, to try and obviously end the cycle of birth and rebirth and death and rebirth, and trying to get to nirvana and escape the world and stuff like that. The world is suffering. Let's try and get off the planet, sort of thing. So he was critical of that. He said, you have to accept whatever suffering comes your way. That's part of the process of your spiritual awakening. And what you do on this planet really matters. That's why he's so important for me.
Yeah. Yeah,
you're here for a reason. You're here for a reason. You're here for a purpose, a vocation.
Exactly, and try and find out what that.
Yeah. Try and find what that is. Yeah.
So, and one of your websites has the title, or is called "Spirituality in Politics."
Yes, it is. It does.
To me, it's two very different. I don't know why really, but actually to me it feels like these are two not very compatible entities.
Indeed, that's why I was very keen to synthesize them.
Yeah.
Well, apart from anything else, one obvious reason to do it was to get the domain name before anybody else thought of it. That was
okay.
Yeah, so make sure I got it first. Yes. Okay. Then on to the more relevant part of your question. Well, it may be a utopian sort of fantasy, but one could argue that the only way we're ever going to make the new paradigm happen is if that people like us take control of society, through democratic processes, political parties. Yeah, we need to take control so that people can then, well, obviously to get in, you'd have to have a lot of people voting for you. So have a lot of people on your side before you started, wouldn't you? So a lot of people were already voting for you. And then once you're in control, then you can put in the sort of policies and the practices, which would help to bring the new paradigm ever closer. I mean, if you even get voted in, you're bringing the new paradigm closer because people want what you have to offer. Yeah. That's why I call it spirituality in politics, because it's a sort of a fantasy about, perhaps one day people like us might be able to take control, and
I don't like the word control though, because
the point
is to get rid of control altogether.
Yeah, I don't mean control in a negative sense. I just mean in the sense of taking positions of power and influence, and government.
Do you think that is possible even because it reminds me of what Michael Tellinger told me when I interviewed him, that he once ran for the presidency of South Africa with his Ubuntu party, and he wanted to, as he said, plant a seed of consciousness in politics, but he came to the conclusion that it's completely impossible because it's so corrupt and it's so entrenched in the 3D thinking and the structural thinking and the control thinking that he just gave up because there was no point in trying. That's what he said to me.
Okay, yeah. All I can say is we live in hope, and it's what the world needs. That's all I can say.
Yeah,
we live in hope, and it's what the world needs. That's why my website is called Spirituality in Politics.
That's good. It's laudable, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. That it is impossible.
Thank you.
but I suspect that it might be a little bit.
You understand the difficulties.
To use to utilize the structures that we want to break by way of the structures. To break the structures.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, you understand what I mean.
I understand what you mean. Yeah. Well, indeed, yeah. But there doesn't seem any other way. You can't get into positions of power, influence government unless you go through the democratic. Well, there is the idea of a political revolution, but I don't think that's going to work. You can't have a revolution unless you have the people on your side. If you have the people on your side, you should be able to get in via democratic means.
Yeah. Well, I guess we need some kind of. I often say that we don't really need leaders in the traditional sense. Leaders,
absolutely.
With capital L, we don't need those anymore because we can think for ourselves, and we are more educated and more informed than ever. In these parts of the world. So what we need are, I guess we will always need administrators, very skilled administrators.
Yeah.
And we will always need people who can inspire us. So I say we need inspirers and administrators. We don't need leaders.
Yeah. Okay.
Because we can manage most of our stuff in our lives ourselves, and we should with love and compassion and all that,
But if there's an overlap between leaders and inspirers, let's call what I call a leader, you're calling an inspirer. So it's like it's the philosophical source to which people look, or to what inspires them. Yeah, that's loosely what I mean by a leader. It's somebody who can inspire.
Yeah. But also, when you look at politics today in a country like Britain or Sweden or I don't know, the United States, of course, it's like people really like to mock their leaders. They vote for them and then they mock them because it's like they need this figure to mock, to think of as if it's something different from themselves, I don't know what I want to say by this, but
yeah. Well, what you're saying is once you get in, it's very hard to maintain your popularity.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I actually think that the leader, or I don't think we should call him a leader even, the prime minister that we have in Sweden right now is actually, I mean, regardless of what I think of his party and his politics and all that, that has nothing to do with him. But his personality, his style is actually very low-key, and many of the Nordic prime ministers, I think, have more or less the same style, which is, I think, not too bad when it comes to this, what we're talking about now, because they're very close to a situation where you don't really have leaders with the capital L. You just have people administrating things, and that's how it should be. I think you shouldn't. I mean, take a country like Switzerland, for instance. Who even knows who's the prime minister of Switzerland? Nobody knows, and I think that's excellent.
I don't. Okay.
Do you know?
I don't know. Is that because they are so low key and not really?
They have a lot of referenda, and I think they have a rotating system or something.
Okay.
So it's really just you vote for a party, and who is in charge is of no relevance really.
Okay. Interesting.
Kind of sympathetic.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so I think you mentioned something about Brexit also on this.
Did I?
On this website, Spirituality and Politics, or have I misunderstood something?
On my website, yes. I am, strangely, you might think, I did actually vote for Brexit. I am I'm not in favour.
Does that have to do with your spiritual inclination?
Indeed, it does, yes. I mean, I perceive the European Union and institutions like it as attempts to get rid of democracy, basically. You can't, you remove elected politicians with unelected people in Brussels or wherever they are. Yeah. So they rule you, they govern you, they lead you, whatever you want to call it. They may seem quite nice, perhaps, but basically I perceive the European Union to be a neoliberal, conservative, capitalist organization, and they are trying to get rid of means that we have, our democratic vote in Britain, to get rid of people like them, because we can't get rid of them. We can vote for our own token puppets who are in hock to the European Union. So to leave the European Union was the only way we could maintain our democratic possibility of voting in people we really wanted.
So you believe in the nation state then?
I believe in the nation state. I believe I don't know if you've heard of it, there's a party, they're a bit low-key party in Britain called the Social Democratic Party. Yeah, that's a popular term, but they're almost non-existent in Britain. But anyway, one of the key parts of their manifesto is the nation state is the upper limit of democracy.
Mm-hmm. But it's not very old. It's from the 1800s in most cases. It was created. The nation state was created in the 1800s in most cases.
Well, indeed, but we didn't have supranational. We didn't have anything like the European Union in the 1800s.
No, but I mean, it's not. It's a bit of a stretch to say that it's a natural thing. It might be natural in some cases.
Okay. Well, I mean, what they're saying is,
or England isn't it? Great Britain isn't even natural because you have Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah. But if you go beyond the nation state, you can't have democracy. Is what they mean. Is if you take it beyond the nation state and you're subsumed to a greater whole. But
I mean, we are globalizing. We know in real time what's happening on the other side of the world. And
are we globalizing?
I can be friends with people in the Philippines.
Absolutely.
Friends with them over the internet, which I couldn't 100 years ago.
Absolutely. Well, we're doing that at an interconnectedness level of the populations. But do we want that to become a world government? Under the current people that are running the world, do we want a world government along those lines where we can't vote for our leaders?
No, that's what we don't want. I agree on that.
Yeah. What we want is a human family brought together through spirituality, not through the current system.
Yeah. So you are not against the United Kingdom's cooperating, are the people of the United Kingdom cooperating closely with the people of Sweden, Germany,
Absolutely.
France,
Absolutely.
everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely.
By way of some other kind of system than
love and cooperation. I mean, this idea of we do something in our national interest. if you do something in your national interest, obviously it's against somebody else's national. So everything you do in your national interest, somebody else is going to hate you, aren't they? So we have to stop thinking about doing things in terms of our national interest. Obviously, that's not going to happen with the current people we have in.
No, that's true.
At the moment,
we need to start a spiritual EU then.
Yeah, a spiritual EU, that would be great. Yes, and a spiritual world government, that would be great.
Yeah,
it's the current ones that they've got envisioned, the ones that I don't like. We need a spiritual world government, or whatever term you prefer for government.
Okay, let's look at the broader picture of esoteric and spiritual matters a little bit here. So I have this thesis that there is really only one pivotal threshold that you. Well, there are several thresholds when you walk the spiritual path, but there's one pivotal, one crucial threshold that you have to step over, and then after that, it's all kind of said and done, really, because it is the notion that there is life after death. So once you've stepped over that threshold, it shouldn't be of any particular importance, I think, to distinguish sharply, at least, between different varieties of what is considered woo-woo in the mainstream. For instance, I mean, why God but not astrology? Why reincarnation but not channeling from beings on the other side of the veil? If you see what I mean. Do you agree on that?
Well, I agree with your basic point. The life after death is the key thing. Once we accept that consciousness doesn't end with death, that's a significant point, isn't it? That, as you say, that's a threshold.
Many people can accept that, and then they cannot accept so many other things.
Yeah, well, that's up to them. I mean, you then, once you've accepted the basic idea of life after death, you then have to see what all the other things that opens up. I mean, you're obviously aware of all the work of Ian Stevenson on past life recall and past life memories and stuff like that.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, all that stuff, past life memories. There are all sorts of other things. I mean, the work of Stanislav Grof, who I was talking about earlier, in the LSD experiences that his people were having, they were having past life memories, and their current traumas were related to incidents in their past life, for example.
Were they able to corroborate that they were actually past life?
Well, that was very difficult. Well, I mean, you'd have to accept the anecdotal evidence. Shall I give you one example briefly? Yeah, okay. But there was one man who had chronic pain in his shoulder, and which no doctor or medical person could understand or explain. Yeah, so nothing physical at all could explain this terrible pain in his shoulder. So during his LSD experiences, he sort of regressed, and he found three. These incidents seemed to pile up upon each other and become interconnected through time. So he found there was one occasion when he was accidentally buried in sand on a beach when he was about 7 in Australia, and that struggle caused great pain in his shoulder. He identified that in his current life. He then went back to, I mean, for Grof, very important are the birth experiences, perinatal experiences while you're being born. While he was being born, his shoulder was trapped against his mother's birth canal or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So he relived that moment and did that. And once he got beyond that, he went back to sort of like the English Civil War when he was a soldier who had a spear. He died on the battlefield with a spear going through his shoulder.
Oh, everything about his shoulder.
Yeah. So these three interconnected things about his shoulder kept recurring. And once he'd relived that scene on the battlefield in the English Civil War, the pain went. So the only proof you can have that story is true is that the pain disappeared.
That's true. I think it's compelling, and people
it seems compelling to
he
me.
Was just self-suggestion, but anyway,
it's compelling evidence. It's compelling anecdotal evidence. Obviously, you can't go back and relive the battlefield thing, or was he ever that soldier on the battlefield? I mean, you couldn't. How could you prove that? But the evidence is that his pain went away once he'd relived those three experiences.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating, and we've talked about so many interesting things here. I don't know if you want to say anything more about astrology, for instance, because of that book you wrote.
I have nothing more to say apart from please go and read it. You can find the links on my website. If anybody wants to read that, you can find the links on my website about astrology. There are other things we could talk about, other great scientists, new paradigm scientists, but it's up to you if you want to finish or...
Well, I don't have any more questions here on my list, but maybe we can talk again sometime. There's so, I mean, there's an endless, of course, potential list of questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, some things we haven't mentioned so far about what we would call new paradigm science.
Yeah.
One is the universe and the planet being alive. Yeah. So we haven't mentioned James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis about the Earth as a living being. That's another topic I've read quite a lot about and know quite a lot about. So there's somebody who follows on from James Lovelock called Peter Russell, who takes James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, which is basically scientific.
Yeah.
He takes it into spiritual levels, and he believes that what we call the new paradigm is about the awakening of the Earth becoming a conscious, self-aware being.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, to me, what the new paradigm is about. That's the next stage in the evolution of consciousness, is we as individual cells on the planet becoming so self-aware into our psyches, or whatever you want to call it, that we reach this threshold point that you're talking, and eventually that the Earth becomes this self-aware conscious being. That's something else we haven't talked about, which is a topic I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. And I believe Gaia is conscious and has been conscious all along, but is also
levels of consciousness. Yeah,
levels of consciousness, and Gaia's consciousness is also elevating itself. And I think it was Matias Di Stefano, young Argentinian, interesting man who has had so many memories from past lives. Anyway, he says he calls human beings Gaia's neurons. So, I mean, why not? We're all part of. I think we're all part of Gaia, and
well, indeed we are.
I think we're also. Goes a bit far, maybe, but I think there's only one life, and that I don't mean that we only have one life and then we die and everything's black. But I mean that there is really only one life, and we are all aspects of that life. So,
absolutely,
if we are 8 billion people now today, we're 8 billion aspects. And when there were 200 people in the world, 200 human beings. It was the same life, but it had only 200 aspects. Now it has 8 billion aspects, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So there's no separation, really. It's just one big life happening.
This is ideas that you find in David Bohm.
Oh, yeah.
And in, well, there's something out that, well, I don't know if you want to carry on. I mean, there's some other subjects I'm interested in. We have a new paradigm going on at the moment, which we loosely have said is from 1980 to 2020. So that's where we are now, 2021. And Fritjof Capra, Fred Alan Wolfe started around there. So we've had this 40-year period where we think a new paradigm was building up.
Yeah.
But in exactly that same period, 200 years ago, there were movements which thought exactly the same thing. They were the Romantic poets in England and the German philosopher tradition, the German idealists. They were all part of this movement, which we would now loosely call new paradigm thinking.
Oh, yeah.
It was a counter movement to the Enlightenment, the science that was going on.
This is what Betty Kovacs is talking about in her book.
Okay, right. So these were, it's an interesting counter to what was going on in Enlightenment science. And they believed, and I've got a quote here from Shelley. Okay, so I made a few notes in preparation for today. Okay, Shelley seemed to think that a new paradigm was emerging, but was wrong. He said, quote, "We live among such philosophers and poets as surpass beyond comparison any who have appeared since the last national struggle for civil and religious liberty. And these men have in common the spirit of the age." So he believed that then, 200 years ago, the spirit of the age was there. His group of poets and the German philosophers were going to initiate the new paradigm. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And he was wrong, because 200 years later,
I mean,
because it's still happening.
We're still trying. That was one turn on the spiral.
Yeah.
And we're now finishing another turn on the spiral.
Yeah. So all I can say is God keeps trying. God keeps
trying, yes. Fascinating. Okay, Graham Pemberton, it's been a pleasure to have you as a guest on the show. And
thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Where can people find your work and you now?
The best place is, on the website, Spirituality in Politics, all one word, spiritualityinpolitics.com. That's got my writing there. There's a contact form there. So if you've got any questions or want to be guided, if you can't find anything you want to read about, you can contact me via there, or you can contact me directly on my email address, which would be graham.pemberton@aol.com or aol.co.uk. Those are possibilities, yeah. So I don't mind if people want to contact me directly at my email address. And obviously I write on Medium. If people don't know what Medium is, medium.com. Just search for Graham Pemberton and obviously it's a bit harder to find a specific article there, but if you put it in the search engine, you might do. So those are ways you can contact me or find out more about me.
Great. Good luck now with your beautiful spreading of knowledge. And
thank you.
I hope you will have success in your music.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope your podcast is successful too. And whoever you invite on it, I hope it goes well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.